Welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring sysadmin expert Don Pizzette, security specialist Daniel Lowry, and Peter.
Hello and welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined today by Don Pizzette. Don, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm channeling my Christmas spirit as we move into the holiday seasons. You know, this is our last live episode, right, for 2022 before we flip into our holiday episodes. So
fear not, we have episodes the next 2 weeks, and they're kind of look backs and best of, like, you know, when Full House goes on vacation and those kind of things.
I thought they were just going to cut and paste a bunch of stuff together and make us sound like we're saying stuff.
We might do that too. Yeah.
But point is, if we really want to screw up on air, this is kind of the last chance for us to do it this year.
Don't worry.
All right. I like those goals. Daniel, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Yeah.
What do you want, man? What do you want from me?
I didn't know it was an option, but it's good to know it is now. And we are joined today by our special guest. We have Jason Hicks, who is the Cyber Executive Advisor at Coalfire. Jason, how are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
And we were just talking, you're in lovely Arizona, which, like us here in Florida, really doesn't get into that Christmas spirit. Or it gets chilly in Arizona sometimes, doesn't it?
They decorate the cacti.
Snow.
Yeah, they decorate the cactuses and palm trees. You know, it's kind of like LA, but it gets cold at night up in the mountains, though. If you get up into Prescott or Flagstaff, you know, they get snow and things like that. And the occasionally, you know, it's very much a desert out here, so you don't get a lot of snow. But you know, it's a lot of, you know, think of the Corona commercial, right, where they got the Christmas tree all decked out on the beach. You know, it's a lot like that.
Yeah, you have more of a chance of a white Christmas than us, but yeah, a lot of cool things to decorate still. All right, well, let's get into our first segment and get to know you a little bit more with rapid fire questions.
Who do you work for?
What's new?
Who are you?
What's happening?
What's wrong with you?
All right, in this segment, we will rapidly fire questions at you, which oddly enough is where the title of it comes from. You'll have approximately 1 minute to answer each question. If you take too long, Peter will buzz you. Like that.
Double buzz.
Maybe even twice if it's really bad. So you'll get buzzed, and then we'll move on to the next question, and we'll rotate around between the three of us here to ask you questions. The first one coming at you from Peter.
All right, well, I knew the name was familiar with Coalfire because I looked back and we had Mike Weber on about a year ago. But for those that maybe didn't hear that episode, or if things have changed, can you tell us just a little bit about Coalfire?
Sure. So Coalfire is a full-service provider of cybersecurity solutions and compliance solutions. So everything from, you know, getting yourself certified, you know, against FedRAMP or GDPR and the other litany of regulatory certifications that are out there, or security maturity certifications that are out there, and also a full suite of cybersecurity services. You know, anything you can think of from AppSec to, you know, virtual CISOs.
All right. Now, you recently stepped into the role of CISO for Coalfire, and you are also the Cybersecurity Executive Advisor. Now, CISO is a well-known title. We've interviewed many over the years, but Cybersecurity Executive Advisor, that one's new to me. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, what your role is?
Yeah, so, you know, my role actually is being what they call a Field CISO over here at Coalfire. So, you know, I'm a former CISO multiple times, multiple publicly traded entities, and they brought a few of us on over here to work with client CISOs to help them sort of maximize the value they deliver, you know, help them craft more compelling messages to their boards, you know, help them get things funded, you know, be a sounding board for difficult issues. But that's basically what we're doing over here. So not so much running their internal security program or anything like that, but working with Coalfire's clients at the executive level.
Now, there's a lot of different companies out there that are very similar to Coalfire. What was it about Coalfire that made you want to go there? Was it their relaxed hiring things, or they don't do background checks, and so you were good with that? What was it?
Yeah, no, so for me, you know, Coalfire's got a really strong leadership team. You know, some of those folks I've known for a long time, so that was obviously a big draw for me. I had very high confidence in their leadership team, and there's just a lot of good energy over here at Coalfire. I mean, the corporation's growing, you know, everybody's hitting their numbers, things are performing well, and it's always nice to be part of an organization that, you know, it's performing well, it's growing, it's helping, you know, people by delivering its mission. I think, you know, there's obviously never going to be a shortage of cybersecurity problems to solve, and I think this is a really good place to, you know, be solving those problems from. You know, I have lots of resources at my disposal to, you know, get whatever I need done, and I think it's a really good culture, good environment, you know, very supportive, very empowering environment. So I think it's been a really good company, and I think it's been a good ride for a short time here, and I think it'll be a good ride for a while. It's an excellent place thus far.
Very nice. Now, you mentioned that you were kind of a virtual CISO before. Is there, I mean, that's great for certain companies. Is there kind of an indicator, though, when you realize that you need to go to a full-time in-house CISO? Like, is there kind of a metric you want to look at for that?
Sure. So I've been a full-time in-house CISO, and I've been a virtual CISO, and I think what really drives it is often, the environment you're operating in. So are you a publicly traded company, or are you maybe a large privately held company? A lot of the companies that don't have regulatory mandates or drivers to have a full-time CISO often will have a pretty advanced security team and probably someone who leads that team day to day, but they may not have the, sort of the executive interaction skills, and you may not want to put them in front of the board and those kind of things, right? So typically, you can get by with a virtual CISO at the executive level in those cases, or perhaps you might have the CISO running that team that's virtual if it's a smaller company that maybe can't afford a full-time CISO. But generally, when you get to a sufficient amount of revenue, let's call it, I don't know, maybe 500 million a year in revenue, it's kind of hard to argue you don't need a full-time CISO, unless, of course, you're privately held and don't have a particular mandate that requires it. But generally, your clients and your investors are expecting you to have somebody who's qualified sort of at the helm, if you will, right? So it sort of depends on how you want to deliver that. In some cases, it makes more sense to have a internal person at a better cost point and bring in somebody real senior as a virtual person. In other cases, it just makes more sense to have your own person. But it's kind of a judgment call for the executive team and for the board, where their comfort level is.
Yeah, if I had 500 million, I think I'd bring in like 6 virtual CISOs and just battle it out. Because that's the kind of thing you can do when you have
it's like Thunderdome for CISOs.
Exactly.
Or Congress.
Congress. Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest challenge facing CISOs right now is, we're dealing with ransomware, we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with all kinds of things. What's the thing that keeps you up?
Well, I think the pace of change is what keeps a lot of us up at night. There's a finite amount of resources that we all have, a finite amount of funding and budget we can get, and probably the biggest challenge is just the talent pool is not very large, right? I was going to say not very deep, but there's a lot of deep talent out there, but there isn't a ton of quantity of that talent out there. So one of the challenges you have as a CISO is, how do I keep track of the pace of change? How do I meet all the different challenges that are coming at us? Things change on an hourly basis in this industry. It's actually what makes it interesting, but it's also what makes it challenging, right? And how do you build the right team, that's flexible enough to handle all those changes and sort of pivot and be able to call audibles on things with the staffing that you have, and sort of how do you grow that team and how do you retain those people, right? I mean, probably if you asked a lot of CISOs what keeps them up at night, other than a potential breach or something like that, it's how do I retain the talented people that I have, and how do I keep bringing in additional talented people, because there's just such a strong market out there for those folks that it's very challenging to retain some of these people. I mean, there's take a lot of your security analysts, your vulnerability folks. I mean, they can go on Twitter right now and say, hey, I need a job, and they're going to have 10 people tweeting at them. This is a real life example. I've seen this actually with some folks. Is okay here. I just got a job offer, right? So I think it's a very challenging operating environment for CISOs to try to stay abreast of everything that's going on, and then also to make sure you've got a strong team to continue to deliver on your program.
See, Don, I could just go anywhere right now. So what are you doing to keep me?
Yeah. What do I got to put in this tweet again?
Yeah, exactly. What's the hashtag?
I think your resume does all the work for me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Wait a second.
Hey, go Coalfire, man. They don't do background checks.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That was my takeaway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to jump into kind of our next segment, and I know it's getting to be the end of the year, and we're talking about next year and what's going to happen, how the world's changing. So what do you see as some of the your predictions for 2022, specifically in the AppSec industry?
So I think, I already kind of beat the dead horse on talent, but I think that's going to continue to be an issue as we go into 2022. I think you're going to see more people outsourcing, and you're going to see the folks that you outsource to also having sort of a challenging time maybe attracting and retaining those people. I mean, they do have an edge in the sense that, you have more variety in the work that those people get to do, right? So it helps us attract and retain people on the service provider level, but, still there's a lot of competition for those resources. So I think you'll see some in-house training programs. A lot of companies now are standing up sort of, let's bring people in, let's train them, almost like an apprenticeship program for security people. And I think you're going to see more companies investing in that, they're thinking, hey, this builds loyalty. It's going to keep people, around our company if we invest in them, and sort of also gives us a ready talent pool to try to, keep some of these people around and kind of fill those gaps as they emerge, right? I mean, ultimately, you're not going to retain all of those people, but hopefully you'll retain a higher percentage. I think you're also going to see a lot around supply chain security. You see the executive order that came out on that. They're basically, we've seen some big breaches this year, caused by supply chain issues. Not to pick on SolarWinds, but that's probably the one that most people are going to be most familiar with. And ultimately, a lot of organizations are sort of not invested in enough AppSec capability or software security capabilities in their SDLCs to be able to truly meet those requirements, right? And when you look at what the feds are going to be asking for, if you want to sell me software, you're going to have to certify that software is safe, right? And ultimately, most people are not doing this to the degree of rigor that's necessary to be able to, answer that question in an affirmative way, right? So it's going to have real business impact for people. And I think that's what might not be immediately evident to a lot of people. There's direct revenue implications on, not being able to say, yes, everything's cool and we've got the appropriate level of security to these government entities. And I think a lot of people may find themselves swept into that supply chain that maybe don't think they're part of it too, which I think is going to be really interesting. So, you're a supplier to one of these software companies, or maybe you've written a library for them or something, and now you might have to have, an extremely high level of rigor in your, SDLC security that, previously you just didn't have to worry about, right? And I think, if I got time for one more, the final thing I was thinking about is, look at all the API-based apps that are out there now, right? You had to sort of attack a website in the past, right? And, maybe through a SQL injection, you could get some interesting data, but now that API offers that data up, as a part, it's a feature, it's not a hack, right? So, assuming you can get the appropriate permissions to get that data. So I think you're going to see a lot of people investing in, how do we protect our API-based, applications and things that are native API-based, where before, you had a WAF, you had a web server, and you sort of might have felt relatively safe that you had all these different layers, right? Where now the, business logic is right in the app, right? It's not something that is happening behind the scenes. So if you can induce the API to do some naughty things, you might get some really interesting data and make somebody like me get more gray hair, right? So I think it's, it's not going to be a fun time for that particular space, but it'll be great for the, the application, like the API gateway folks and some of that kind of stuff. I know AWS and Azure both have a service for that, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other products out there too. So you'll see some growth, I think, in that space too.
It's interesting predictions, because in the past, when we talk about like cybersecurity trends, it's kind of fallen on the security officers, like, hey, there's this new deep packet inspection on firewalls, or new intrusion prevention services, or web application firewalls, like you mentioned, were all the rage 5 years ago. But now almost everything you mentioned is really developer focused, like getting the developers not to screw up in the first place to keep the attackers out. And so I think a lot of security professionals are going to find themselves in an odd position if they haven't at least spent a little bit of time learning how SDLCs are designed, or just any kind of secure coding practices. That's where a lot of the focus next year is going to be on. I think we're going to talk about a few things in the news segment that'll align with that, but it's a good prediction, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think you're going to see, a lot of our existing practitioners probably came up on the network side. The folks that didn't come up on the dev side, to your point, are going to have a really hard time sort of, dealing with some of these changes, right? It's sort of, infrastructure as code is no longer a niche-y kind of cool thing that you hear about at conferences. It's like, this is now your operating model. So you got to figure out how to do this. And I think there's some reluctance on some people wanting to sort of learn some of these things too. I mean, I know we went through a big digital transformation at a different company, previous career moment. And we had a room full of infrastructure people and basically said, hey, we will pay for you to learn all this new cloud stuff, right? This was, 4 or 5 years ago. So back then it was like, oh, this newfangled, cloud stuff, right? Like, we'll fund all of your learning because this is where we're going. Like, we're not going to have a data center in like 3 or 4 years. So like, this is happening, and we want you to happen with us. We want you to come on this journey with us. And, not maybe a quarter of that room raised their hand and said, yeah, I'll take you up on it. I think the rest were on their phones going, oh, I better find a traditional infrastructure shop so I can find another job, right?
Wise man really once told me never turn down a free education.
Absolutely. I mean, think of all the money we all spent on whatever education we all have, right? I mean, if somebody had, at that point in my career, a guy like me got up and said, hey, I'll pay 5, 10, 15 grand worth of training, I'd have been the first guy jumping out of my chair. And I was really shocked at how few people were like, yes, I want to do this. And, you got to invest in yourself, right? Especially with the rate of change we have in this industry. Like, you can't sit and idly by, right? The world will just fly right by you.
Yeah, that's my prediction for next year. I think this cloud thing is going to take off.
I thought your prediction was going to be more people will not take free training.
Yeah, more people will turn down money.
Yeah.
All right. Well, want to get to a couple of things that are happening over at Coalfire. So you guys have a couple of new-ish products that are out. ThreatFix being the first one. What is ThreatFix exactly?
So ThreatFix is a really nice way of normalizing and consolidating the data you get out of all your application vulnerability scanning tools, and not so much at the network level, but at your traditional app security, AppSec tools that you've got in your CI/CD pipeline, right? If you're like me, you probably had 3 or so of these things, and each one has a 6-figure price tag on it. And you don't get maximum value out of them because your people are just overwhelmed with stuff. And then, they got to go into the interface for each product, and they got to learn the interface. And, people just, developers want to consume their patch data and their jobs basically in Jira or Git or whatever they're used to consuming it in. And what ThreatFix does, it'll take the data out of all 3 or however many scanners you have. It'll normalize it. It'll label everything the same, because the other fun thing is vulnerabilities might have 3 different labels and 3 different scanning tools, right? So this allows you to have a concise, normalized view of everything, and then you can through integrations you can then populate these tasks out to developers in whatever their preferred modality is, right? If you're a Jira shop, it'll go to Jira. If you use a different backend, it'll go to those. So it's a nice way to get maximum value. And honestly, the business case sort of writes itself, because you figure I got 3 6-figure investments, I'm probably only really using 2 of them, right? So now I can use a tool I've already paid for, by adding this to the mix, right? And I make everybody's life easier because they're not all trying to consume, 3 different web interfaces that might not be pretty too, right, on top of it. So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
And the other one was through an acquisition, Neuralis. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so Neuralis. So the Coalfire Neuralis platform, basically. So think of that, if ThreatFix is on the AppSec side, Neuralis is more on the network pen testing side. And if you think about it, we've always had these horrible Excel spreadsheets with, 1,000 vulnerabilities that some poor team has to track and update and try to chase people for, right? So what this platform does for you is you can load all your pen testing data into that platform, and you can also run, it's got an ASM module, so an attack surface management module, so you can continuously scan your attack surface. All that data gets pulled in. You can run pen tests through this platform. We've got a services component to it if you want to layer that on, where people can validate those vulnerabilities for you, or they can run full pen tests for you. And again, all of this stuff ends up in the platform. And why do I keep beating on that? You get out of the Excel vulnerability business, basically, right? So it's got a full vulnerability management for these sort of vulnerabilities tool built right into it. So you can run your remediations, your risk assessment of those various vulnerabilities, all in this one tool, basically, for all your vuln scans, your pen tests, anything else associated to that. So it's sort of one to rule them all if you think about it from that particular aspect of your security program. But if anything else, it makes people's lives easier. Again, if you take nothing else away from it, it's you're going to make your vulnerability management team much happier, because instead of trying to manage thousands of vulns in an Excel spreadsheet and chasing people to get those fixed, you can manage it in this platform. And then you've got hooks into, again, things like Jira and other tools where you can manage those tasks, again, in the format folks are used to receiving those tasks in. So you get a big efficiency gain, and ultimately your vulnerability management people are going to hang around longer because they're not managing that in such a painful way.
Yeah, it's like Highlander, one platform to rule them all. It always comes back to that. All right, well, we want to thank you for taking the time. And also, I should mention, if you want to learn about all these things, coalfire.com is the URL, so easy one, not one of those weird .io.cc something. So.
.ru.
And just so we don't,
Yeah.
just so we don't get a lot of write-ins on this, Peter was absolutely mixing Highlander and Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Live long and all right. Well, Jason, we want to thank you for taking the time and joining us today. We appreciate it, and I know it sounds like you're a very busy person, especially being kind of newish in this position. So, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's great being here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you all for watching, but stay tuned. We're going to come back. As Don mentioned, we got the news coming up right after this quick break on Technado with Don Pizzette.
This is Kevin. He's studying online for a Microsoft certification and using another online IT training service. He's also on his second pot of coffee today to stay awake. And this is Kyle. He's also studying Microsoft but using IT Pro TV. Rather than watching a boring voiceover PowerPoint, he's actually enjoying the training with two hosts in an interactive format. Both Kevin and Kyle have access to virtual labs and practice tests, but Kyle can also get help through a live chat with other IT Pro TV members and his instructors, as well as post to a Q&A forum. He can even search for exactly what he's looking for in the interactive video transcripts, all while paying less than Kevin. Oh, and Kyle can also watch in comfort via Roku app. Kevin and Kyle are both learning IT, but Kyle is enjoying the journey. Want to be more like Kyle? View the plans to start your IT Pro TV membership today.
All right, welcome back to Technado with Don Pizzette, and sorry for the long break there. I had to go watch all of the Lord of the Rings movies because Don made me.
Penance.
Yeah.
Just 3 days later.
Two Hail Marys and watch all 3 Lord of the Rings movies twice.
Yep.
And all 5 Hobbit movies.
And every Dune variation.
That would be like 6 weeks to watch all that. That's like 4-hour movies. And...
I remember I watched the Star Wars back when it was just a trilogy, and that junk took a while.
Yeah.
And now, I don't think it's possible.
You watch all 9 of them or however many there
Now
are.
would be,
All
I
the
think I
spin-offs.
watched them back when it was just 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah,
I don't think
you
I
do
could.
Without falling asleep, like by the end, would be tough.
I don't think I could watch that Han Solo movie again. That was
didn't like
pretty
it, huh?
terrible.
Not a fan.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the news from this past week. And first is something we kind of touched on because it was happening while we were recording last week. This is from AWS, from their own blog. It says, summary of the AWS service event in the Northern Virginia, which is US-EAST-1 region. And yeah, that was out most of that day, it felt like, when we were recording. And most of the business day in the US East, so do we know what happened now?
Yep, and that I generally don't like to report on outages like these until we find out what the cause was, because that's where we really learn something.
We're just guessing otherwise.
So we do know now that Amazon has released their findings of what happened, and what was going on is that when we interact with a cloud service like AWS or Azure or whatever, there's the network that we see that's exposed to us, the customer, but then there's a private network on the back end that is disconnected from the internet that's available to the company, the hosting company, right? So AWS has that. Their out-of-band management network that manages all of the hardware that our cloud infrastructure runs on top of. Well, they sort of had a little bug in the way that their platform functioned on the back end, but it went unnoticed for years. So this particular bug has been there for a long time. And the right scenario finally hit where it was triggered. So what they were doing is they were scaling up. They were adding more infrastructure into the environment to get ready for the holiday seasons because...
Seems smart.
Yeah, online shopping picks up, Black Friday, all that other stuff. So, they were actually kind of coming off of Black Friday, so they were just kind of increasing more. And when they did that, some servers started doing reporting in. So new infrastructure comes up, it has to report in, and the system was getting overwhelmed. Well, when the system gets overwhelmed, you're supposed to have what are called backoffs, right? Where, like, if you fail to connect to a website and you just immediately retry, well, you and everyone else who's trying to connect is going to immediately retry.
It's like a DDoS attack, essentially, right?
You do a denial of service, So you normally have a backoff, which is a time offset. Like you say, I'm going to retry, but at a random interval between 1 and 5 seconds. And then that way, not everybody's retrying at the same time. Their system had a backoff, but it wasn't coded properly. So it didn't work. And everything started retrying, and they denial of serviced their management platform, their management network. Now, by doing that messed with their monitoring system, so they couldn't diagnose the problem.
Like where it was coming from?
Yeah. All of their diagnostic tools were basically kicked off by this. So the engineers had to just turn to raw logs. They had to look
That
at the
was
log
fun.
files. Yeah, I do
So
not
that's
feel
why
for
it
them.
took as long as it took.
So then they just basically
You ever read a log?
cataloged.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Yeah, they cataloged the traffic by what was generating the most traffic. The most traffic is being generated by DNS failures. And so they shifted that off of their management network, but the problem was still there. So they had to basically keep going down the line until they hit the winner. And when they finally found that out from their own scale-up activity, they were able to correct it and solve the problem. But it took hours and hours and ended up being pretty long. Now, what I thought was interesting was sites like the IT Pro TV website were unaffected by the outage.
Which is on AWS.
In the US East region, primarily. That's where our primary servers
That's
are.
the key word, right?
So, well, if you're multi-region and all, you can fail over. We didn't even have to fail over. Our resources in US East-1 were not affected. And so what it turns out is, if you were scaling up, if you were adding more bandwidth to a load balancer, if you were adding more EC2 instances, then yeah, you were hosed, right? But if you were just running constant, then you were fine. And we do something, we automatically scale up. So as our traffic gets busier, we add more servers in, but we don't automatically scale down. We never remove servers. Like once they go in, they're just in there and that's that. We can manually scale down, right? But big systems, like when you look at a big company like Netflix, they automatically scale up and automatically scale down because they save millions of dollars a year, right? We're not at that scale. So they would scale down and then couldn't scale back up. And that's what brought their systems down. They weren't able to perform and you had an outage.
I know what that's like.
Yeah. Sometimes you
Been
just
there,
can't
done
scale
that,
up.
got the T-shirt, right?
And,
You get a t-shirt.
Man, remember that time I accidentally miscoded that logging system? That was fun.
So this is probably something that existed in all their other regions that they've had a chance to now proactively go and take a look at.
Yeah, because they triggered the event by doing a scale up on their back-end network.
Yeah.
And so if they had done that same scale up activity in other regions, this same thing would have triggered. But the US East-1 is their biggest, busiest data center.
I mean, that's the first and foremost,
And
like the default. That's what
it's a
it is.
double-edged sword, right?
What do you think the after-action report looks like on that? Are they going, all right, from now on, when we try crazy stuff, we go with like, Southeast Asia or somewhere.
In Thailand 4.
In the middle of like 2 a.m.
Well, so I bet, and this company has more money than anyone if they can send their CEO into space and stuff. So what they're likely doing is, hey, having an out-of-band management network is nice. Well, let's have an out-of-band monitoring network also. Like, let's just go ahead and add another one. Like for a regular company, that would be an exorbitant cost.
Yeah.
For them, it's like, all right,
Cost of
we'll
doing
just
business. Yeah.
They're duplicating all their stuff on Azure.
Yeah.
Right now.
All the C levels go, let me see what I got on me. I mean, I guess we can pay for that right now.
Can you keep it under $1 billion?
Yeah.
Then I don't have to transfer any money.
Yeah.
As long as you keep it under $1 billion, I don't have to tell my wife.
Yeah. Billy, what do you got on? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's crazy. Interesting to see. I figured by this week we'd because they do a pretty good job of telling you
They do,
what's going on. So I appreciate the transparency there. All right, next up, let's head over to tomsguide.com, which that's a part of Tom's Hardware, right?
Yes.
It's like his gear and stuff. All right. Mouse movers make it look like you're working, and they're red hot with remote workers. And so this is for people that their company's actually monitoring to see if there's activity and if you're doing something. It's funny because this reminds me. I remember like the days of Net Zero and all those kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, and if you
I had a
went
roommate.
inactive, it would hang you up. Yes.
Yeah, I had a roommate in college where he had one of those plugins where it paid you to browse because they're feeding you ads. So he'd just leave. He got it was software at the time,
Right.
though, to move mouses. So now it's actually, this looks like a hardware solution, right?
It's both.
Yeah. So
right?
It's both.
Well, you have options, right? So what's going on here is now that people are working remote, a lot of companies have started introducing monitoring software to see whether or not people are actually working or actually at their computer and being alive and doing things. If you take a look at like Microsoft Teams, for example, in Microsoft Teams, if you don't touch your keyboard or mouse for a while, eventually it switches your icon from being available to being idle, right? Or maybe
whatever
away,
it is,
so it just kind of depends. Well, also, if you're not touching your keyboard or mouse for 5 or 10 minutes, your company might have a power saving plan in place, so your monitor goes off. So if they know your monitor is off, you're obviously not working, your monitor is off. And so what's going on is there's a range of devices that are out there to help people if they need to go take care of their kid or take their dog outside or whatever, they don't want to get in trouble, that they can trick the system by generating mouse movements. Now, there is software that can do this, but if you're on a company computer,
Yeah,
you
can't
likely don't
install
have
that.
permission to install the
Yeah.
software. Or even if you did, your company's software inventory system would see that software
What's
running.
this? Move my mouse app.
Yeah.
Mouse jiggler.
Yeah.
And so there's also these little USB keys that you can plug in that do a virtual mouse, but pretty obvious. You see it in the device manager of the system that it's not a Logitech mouse.
Mouse jiggler. Yeah.
So companies have started selling these physical devices that sit underneath your mouse, and they can just kind of
shake a little bit.
rotate or tilt or whatever to
think they
slowly
spin
move the mouse.
underneath them or something
There's
like that?
several
Yeah.
different models. One really cool one has an LED screen on it, and by moving the LED lights, it tricks the mouse into thinking it's moving.
Oh,
So
it thinks it's moving across something,
Yeah.
but it's the,
yeah, I mean,
That's crazy.
they a surprising amount of sophistication has gone into this. And
You
when
could
I
do this
read
with a belt sander, right? If you
Probably.
just hovered it.
fastest mouse, it worked great for like 5 minutes.
It's like, well, I got nothing left. For
I was
this
thinking
corn.
like a oscillating fan and just hook it to your mouse.
But I hadn't heard of this, and so I went on Amazon and did a search, and sure enough, there's like 40 or 50 different types you can pick from that range from $15 all the way up to $30, $50,
that's
depending on
cheap.
how fancy you want to get. But it's a whole new industry that's been created around remote work.
I feel like you could do this with your pet too, just like
You just tie it to their
tie it
tail.
to the tail or something, or the toddler, like the kid that you have to
Oh,
watch.
yeah.
Just put this
Yeah,
mouse.
hold this, son.
Now, my problem is I use a trackball, and none of these work with a trackball, so I'd have to...
Well, I mean, you
Switch
use a
mice.
trackball when you're actually working,
Well, that's true.
but you just plug in that Logitech. And
See, I remember one time, like my mouse died, and because I've got the magic mouse that the one that you have to plug in, and of course the plug is on the bottom, so you can't use it while it's plugged in.
it is awesome.
So I
That's
remember
frustrating.
like trying to learn at home all of the keyboard commands because I'm like, I'm dead. I mean, I've got to keep working for a little bit. So maybe I could just use that argument of, oh, my mouse wasn't, but I just know all the shortcuts.
So my son the other day was having problems. He was playing Fallout 4 on his computer, and something was going wrong. And I walked over, and he's got one of those fancy gaming mices.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it's annoying. I don't like to use the mouse, and so I do all keyboard shortcuts when I go to help him.
Yeah.
And it blew his mind.
Yeah.
He was like, "How did you do all that with just the keyboard?" And I was like, "Oh man, my first computer
failed you.
didn't have a mouse. Like we didn't always have mice." But today's generation
Mouse doesn't work on
all over
DOS.
their mice.
Listen, son, when I was your age, we had these fancy mice attached to our computers. I had to get a real mouse. Tell him, step on that key.
Oh, that would do it too. Like a mouse and with the wheel, you could probably set something up with the trackball underneath, Don. And the wheels
So
just going
I
around.
literally like heard, and when I was in college, somebody had hooked up because of that very like net zero issue or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
They'd hooked up an oscillating fan,
So crazy.
right, and just like with popsicle sticks and tape,
And it would
so
just
that
do
it
just
would like,
enough.
and it would just move the mouse nonstop.
Yeah, the software my friend had, it was random. I remember that was important to him because I guess whatever company, I don't know if they could actually track where your
Patterns.
mouse is moving.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You can.
I guess
That'd be
so.
a bit excessive.
But especially back in like 1998 and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was making, pennies an hour kind of thing, but he had left that computer on all the
Forgot
time.
about that.
Yeah.
Net zero would pay you.
That's crazy.
That's right.
Good times, good times.
All right. Well,
Take me back.
I've never heard of these things, Don, and I do not have one.
He
And-
works hard.
And are we tracking to see if our mice are moving for our employees?
I don't know. Are we?
I don't know if we are or not, but I can definitely tell you none of us are bored enough to go and look at the data if it's there. So
I'm concerned that that's not a definitive no, and not
Is that what
resounding no
happened with that
I'm looking
dude that like fired 900 people on a Zoom call?
Oh my goodness,
because
that guy.
they were remote workers and they were like, you're working
Did we
like
talk
2
about that
hours
last
a day.
week? I don't think we
I don't
did.
think we did.
I don't
Yeah,
think
it was
we did.
better.com.
Yeah.
There's the video of it now, like people like recorded.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
actual
I
firing.
watched it. The guy was pretty callous, and he said productivity was one of the reasons they were releasing people. But
God, but December.
one of the
Yeah.
funny comments on it, though, because the guy said, like, the last time I did this, I cried, but I'm going to try and stay strong. And
You poor thing.
People were talking about how bad it was that he fired 900 people before the holidays. But this one was like a Reddit comment I thought was funny. Like, a lot of people are overlooking the positive here that he was able to overcome and not cry. I mean, that really shows some development and
I
strength.
mean, he's shown growth.
What a hero. Yeah.
Strength.
What a hero. An inspiration to us all. All right, let's take a look at do I say Microsoft? OnMSFT.
It's on Microsoft. Yeah.
On Microsoft, which is onmsft.com. And now I've got the next question. SIP? SIP?
STFU? What?
The first word here?
What? Oh, SIP phones.
Yeah.
SIP phones. I should really check these things beforehand. SIP phones can now support Teams calls with Microsoft's SIP gateway. And so clearly I'm not familiar with the term SIP, but it's something IP.
So,
right?
Sure. I don't know what SIP stands for. Do you know, Daniel?
I've been trying to think off the top of my head, but no, I don't.
Yeah, whatever.
Session initiation protocol is what I get by reading the first line of the second paragraph.
Well, there we go. Is that it? It's not in the first line that I'm looking at.
For the second paragraph.
Oh, well.
For those unfamiliar, SIP, Session Initiation
I just
Protocol
heard that.
phones,
I thought software IP
are
phone or
internet
something.
protocol telephones that let internet service providers integrate basic phone capabilities with email, web, live chat, and other features via IP networks.
Well, SIP phones
my
have been around for quite some time. The original voice over IP phones needed a standardized protocol. SIP is what came to the day, save the day, and so that's what a lot of us have called it. Other vendors like Cisco had other protocols like Skinny, which just over the years kind of were replaced, and SIP is the standard voice over IP protocol used. Well, Microsoft rolled out Teams calling several years ago, but it was proprietary. And so it was kind of locked in, even though it was actually using SIP, they weren't making it available for people to connect with. And if you wanted to get a voice over IP, like a physical phone that connected to Teams calling, you had to get one that was officially supported by Teams, which means part of the Microsoft program and the vendors signed up for. So it had to be Teams compatible. If you just had a regular old SIP phone, couldn't connect it to Teams calling. Well, Microsoft has changed their stance on that and released a new product called the Microsoft SIP Gateway. You can add it to your Office 365 account, and then you can use any SIP-compatible phone, which is basically every VoIP phone on the planet. So if your company has a huge investment in Cisco phones or Mitel or whatever, then you can actually get those and connect them to Teams. Now, don't get too excited.
Okay.
The basic phone line functionality is going to work, but things like your address list, your speed dial buttons, those aren't going to work. That's where you need to have a Teams compatible phone. So it's not perfect, but it does allow you to continue to use some hardware you already have.
Why the change of heart all of a sudden from Microsoft deciding to let everybody play nicely together?
I think that there really just wasn't a big push for them to do it because they had to create a product for this. They had to create the Microsoft SIP gateway that you could deploy and they could charge money for.
Yeah.
So that's effort, and they just didn't have enough customers. So they probably had some major government customer that said, we need this,
Yeah.
and that's why we have it now. Yep.
Well, the government's good for something, I guess.
Yeah. Spending money.
Yeah, they do enjoy that, don't they?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So they show a picture here with a Cisco phone with Teams on it, which is kind of neat. But so is this the person in that photo says? So I got to preview this. Is this out fully now?
Yeah, that the preview actually happened a few months ago. I think far back in July or something.
Okay.
So just now they're making it generally available, so anybody should see that Microsoft SIP Gateway as a new service in their Office 365 account.
Very cool. All right, and what's not cool this week is who got pwned. So let's take a look
Everybody.
at that.
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
Fatality.
Yeah!
Let's take a look at the blog at malwarebytes.com for this next article, and it took me a second to figure out why there were a bunch of snails as the stock photography at the top of this, but I figured it out. And this is an updated article. The Log4j 0-day Log4Shell, get it, shell, arrives just in time to ruin your weekend. So this would have been right before this last weekend, but it's continuing to ruin people's weeks now. So all I know is that this is Java-based or something, but what's going on here and who's this affecting?
All right, now normally when we say who got pwned, it's a specific company, but Daniel's joke a moment ago, somewhat right.
Everybody.
Just about everybody. Java is a very common enterprise programming language. It totally sucks, but it's still used in lots and lots of places. So what happens is in Java, you have a number of standard libraries that are built into it, and one of them is a debug logging library. So if you want to generate log messages and send them to a central location, you can use this built-in functionality called Log4j. Unfortunately, it had a vulnerability in it. A security researcher found a way to exploit it, to take advantage of that, to execute code on the destination logging server, which is horrible. And, they shared that information with the parties that be. A patch was released. This was actually in the Apache Struts implementation of Log4j, which is used in a ton of places. And The rest of us learned about it with a very short amount of time to go in and actually fix it. There are many attackers online taking advantage of this right now. One website reported that there have been over 840,000 attacks using the Log4j exploit just in the last 48 hours. So
did these attacks start after that this was released, this was out, or did we
Yes.
know that people were already aware of this and using this?
Everything I've seen was that it's happened after the
I
attack.
read an update that said that it looks like they have been exploiting this. The people that released the proof of concept and the fact that it did exist, that they had been exploiting it from early as 1st of December.
Oh, wow.
And then after it was publicly released, then everybody was like, "Oh, this looks good."
Yeah.
Maybe the people
so
that
they were
discovered it were hacked.
Well, they were probably like, "Oh, this is awesome. Let me kind of play around with this a little bit." And then once I've pilfered the pockets of whoever, then I don't care.
Then look like a white knight.
Yeah.
Come in.
Oh,
So this one, it's a big deal. Companies are rushing to fix it. You're likely getting emails from companies telling you their status because it's such a big deal, like it's made the national news and all that. Daniel, this is kind of in your field. Do you want to give us a summary of how this thing works?
All right. So what ends up happening is they're doing basically substitution. And in that substitution, so you have like a variable, and I want to put stuff in that variable, right? I don't know what it is yet, but if I have an app that can take input from the end user, then I now have something that I can put inside of that variable. And there's a system that can do lookups, and it will do that using the logging mechanism, the Log4j mechanism, right? So what ends up happening is I go, hey, instead of looking up something on the server, why don't you reach out to this other server, which is controlled by the attacker, and it will get that information from there. So once that information comes back, it goes, cool, I will substitute with whatever's in this variable. It's commands. I will run the commands, and it just does that. So it's like a deserialization attack where once it opens up that variable and it reads what's inside, it just goes, oh, I'll execute this.
Why not?
And why? Because why the heck not? And the security researcher discovered that it does that and goes, oh, this bad. This real bad. So anything I give it, as long as it can reach out and connect to my malicious server. So a lot of times I see this using an LDAP query. So you just stand up a malicious LDAP server. Once it asks that LDAP server for the specific information you asked it for, it comes back with your RCE. So, hey, open a shell or copy this X, Y, or Z file or download this file from another server. And these are the kind of things that can happen.
Yep.
And then there you go. It gets popped. It deserializes that, runs that command, and you have the ability to run. And it runs at the level of that user. Now, these log systems a lot of times are centralized logging. So what's happening is it's going back and running maybe under a SIEM system or something that's aggregating logs, and most likely running with system privileges,
with an
root
admin,
privileges.
yeah.
Yeah. So no, you're totally pwning people.
So if I'm correct, this is something like a hole that's existed for a while, just no one's discovered.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like that's got to be really weird as a researcher to come across something like that, because you're like, this can't be.
Oh, you know, you're
There's no
doing
way.
you're doing your root dance after
Yeah.
this.
You're like,
Yeah.
am I the first? Am I really the
well,
first
what
one
you
to
do
find
is you
this?
see it and you go, can I do this?
Yeah.
And you go, hold on here, and then you fail, a couple hundred times, but you're convinced that it's gonna work. And you go, okay, so I stand up this, and it says, oh, hell yes.
Yeah.
And then the root dance starts.
And then you're like looking out the window, like, is
Yeah.
the FBI coming? Did
then you're
they-
like, well, you probably do it against your own stuff
Sure,
at
okay,
first, right?
yeah.
You build like a test environment to see if it's going to work.
oh yeah, sure.
And then when it does, you go, hey, Minecraft.
Yeah. and that actually highlights another point, which is this was an open source library that's
Right.
made freely available that had one person who was maintaining it.
You said this is Apache?
And
Yeah.
in the Apache Foundation. And this one person, it's not their fault. Well, I guess it sort of is, but there's just one person doing work for free. But then this Log4j functionality is being used by these billion-dollar
companies.
multinational mega companies that aren't putting money into it. So it's not getting the financial support, the security rigor that we might see in other areas, that people are just not reviewing that code.
And this is a supply chain attack. Because
And this is what happens. Yeah.
they are utilizing something that they do not own. It's an underlying technology that they're leaning on. And that's why it's important not only to test your own stuff, but to test all the stuff that that is being supported
Right,
by, or
yeah.
that it supports, that gets support from.
Don, are you implying then that I mean, these big companies should be contributing more to these open source projects?
They should.
Absolutely.
Open source is great because it is free. You can get in it, you can look at the code, but if you're using it as a commercial entity, you should give back. You should contribute back to some of the different products that you use.
All right. Well, that's fun. Well, let's
Indeed.
take a look at our last story for the day, which is WTF.
Where did you get that soundbite from?
I think I just searched WTF on like YouTube or something. And it was, yeah, I have to look back. All right, this one is from CoinDesk.com, where I get all my news and my Bitcoin related news.
Yeah,
and
it's
things.
important.
My Dogecoin. McDonald's McRib NFT, which I can't believe like I'm saying that as a sentence. You know, those words. The McRib NFT.
It feels like the end of society.
Yeah, this is what we're going to do. The McDonald's McRib NFT project links racial slur recorded on blockchain. A company needs to weigh the risks and rewards when deciding to create NFTs. So are we saying that the McRib in and of itself is racist, or this is a...
The McRib is racist.
Yeah. Has it been Me Too'd or canceled?
All right. If I had to pick one thing that was like the single dumbest technology of 2021, it would be the NFT, the non-fungible token.
Yeah, agreed.
These things are ridiculous. The fact that people pay money for them merely highlights how
Lots of
ridiculous
money.
our economy is.
Yeah.
This is what's wrong with society. The NFT really summarizes it. But regardless, they exist. People use them. A lot of companies like the NBA have gotten in it. They've been doing NFTs on various seconds of basketball games. McDonald's has decided to get in with a McRib project where you can buy an NFT that represents apparently a sandwich made of processed meats,
But shaped into rib form.
shaped, poured, liquid
into
meat
rib
poured into
A mold.
yeah. That Simpsons episode was hilarious
And then
when they did
microwave.
that.
I
didn't see
that. Oh yeah,
didn't
they
see it
show
either.
them like pouring it out of vats into the. That's awesome. Anyhow,
I gotta get some McRibs.
point is, this is built off of blockchain. And blockchain does a few things really, really well. And the best thing that it does is it creates an immutable public ledger, which means a record of all transactions that is completely public and cannot be modified. Well, when you make a transaction like purchasing or selling an NFT, you can attach comments to it, and those comments become part of the blockchain. Oh. And so someone did an NFT transaction for a McRib, apparently, or some McRib-related item. I never actually did
This
see
looks
what
like
the item was.
McDonald's actually originally was giving away these.
But it's an
these
NFT
NFTs.
like that represents a McRib sandwich.
Yeah,
right?
it said no purchase necessary. Chance to win one of 10 exclusive McRib NFTs came from McDonald's originally.
Well, one of the recipients in their transaction comments used a racial slur.
Okay.
And so now that's a part of the immutable ledger, which means it can never go away ever.
So I thought they were saying that when they got it from McDonald's, it already contained the racial slur.
Yeah, it says an early transaction to what appeared to be the Ethereum address associated with the official McRib NFT collection contained the racial slur inscribed directly on the Ethereum blockchain.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that would, it would make sense if they were using a third party to
I'm
handle
sure they
all
hired
of
a
this.
company. They didn't get
So-
that out of the fryer.
Whoever that company was must have done some various things. And now I will say that obviously we can't say the racial slur here.
I don't even know what
Yeah,
it
where
is.
is it? Is it down in this?
It was not like a Klansman making a statement. It was like something Tupac would say, or
Okay, I got you. I get where you're going with this.
So it was a racial slur used in a friendly manner.
Gotcha.
Did that make sense?
I get where you're trying to go.
But regardless of usage or intent or whatever, because it's in the blockchain, it's there forever, right?
It's
It
there
can never
forever.
go
You
away.
can't get rid of it. Immutable.
And now it's attached to McDonald's, even though McDonald's didn't do it. It's there. This is like on record. And it should be a warning. We've talked about this before. Like if you've been, especially if you're one of our younger listeners, if you've been on the internet your whole life, there are things you've done when you were 12 or 14.
The internet never forgets.
They'll still be there when you're 60 years old or when you're 40 years old applying to become a manager at a company or something. That history is still there.
I don't know if you've noticed this. People like to dig that stuff up and then use it to beat you with.
Well, and
We have a whole segment called Milkshake Duck.
yeah, we do.
And you can do right to forget request. In theory, you could say, like, I'm going to take a week off of work and focus on expunging my history. Let me get all these frat parties or whatever out of the... I didn't go to frat parties.
Is that a company? Is there a company that could do that?
I'm
for
sure
you?
there are.
That's a great idea.
I feel like
But if
there's
it's
a
in the
vacuum there.
blockchain, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Because then what you would have to do is you'd have to say, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get enough processing power to take over 51% of the mining pool for that blockchain, and then I can remove those records.
Now, what if you bought that NFT? Then could you delete
You
that
can only
NFT
add
from
to
the
it.
world? No. Okay.
No, you're now on the blockchain as the
buying.
new owner or a link in it. You could add your own racial slur if you wanted.
What if I print it out? I want to print out this NFT and then get rid of it on the internet.
You cannot do
Can't
that.
do that.
That's not how that works.
I do love there's all these conversations I've seen on Twitter where people are like, just screen grabbing someone's NFT and they're like, you can't do that. That's mine. It's like, you don't know how NFTs work.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And if you're a listener and you've purchased an NFT thinking that it had value, you're absolutely right. For some strange reason, it has value today.
I will say this McRib one, because they said they gave away 10. I got to think this one's the most valuable one now because of its notoriety.
That's right. It's the famous McRib.
The McRacist rib.
The McRacist.
I'm gonna cease and desist. It's already
Yeah, it's already here. We've been contacted by
amazing.
McDonald's Corporate.
They're fast.
Ray Kroc is going to come
there's
beat your
the-
door down. And
I finally I found it. It's under this ad. What it says.
You found it. Yeah.
You found it?
Can't read
Oh
it.
yeah. Can
saw
I
it
read
the
the
other
last
day.
5 words?
maybe.
No, I probably can't. Read that
I
word
would
either.
steer clear.
Yeah,
of that one.
no, it's good. Yeah, now I see why now. Yeah. See, I live a life of privilege.
You do.
All right. Hey, speaking of privileged, you might be privileged enough to join. That's not a bad segue. Let's start that over. Hey, we've got a webinar coming up, and we can just delete all that out from before this, right? It's in the blockchain? This whole episode is in
Never
the
ever.
Oh, crap. All right, next webinar, Cloud Computing Confidential, Secrets to Leveraging the Cloud in Your Organization. That's taking place with David Linthicum and Mike Roderick on Thursday, January 13th. So we're already in 2022 there. We've reached the end of the webinars for 2021, but thank God. But this one is about secrets to leveraging the cloud in your organization, and you can register for it at itpro.tv/webinars. You can also see all the past ones we've done, like one we just did, which was the most in-demand IT job for 2022, which is fantastic. So if you're looking to get into a new IT career or switch gears, this is a great one for you. And that's all available, both the upcoming and the past ones at itpro.tv/webinars. And also hit us up over at technado.com, where you can see all the latest episodes. You can send in your mama jokes about Don's
do
mom
love those.
specifically. Yeah, we love those.
We got to
And
get a website, donsmom.com.
by the way, the guy wrote back to me. He's like, "Oh, that was a reference to King of the Hill," and I was like, because I wrote, "Hey, Rusty, here's your
Rusty Shackelford.
yeah, here's your shirt," but I put
Yeah.
Rusty in quotes, and he's like, "Oh, that's a reference." I'm like, "Oh, don't worry, Daniel knew."
Daniel always knows.
'Cause I think I
I
sent it
remember
out before. The
I was
episode
at
went
your
out.
house one time, like having a party, and you come up to me and you go, "There was a show back on like in the '80s, and it had this guy, and he had a toy." I was like the Wizard. Like he barely got the words. It's like some weird obscure show. I was like,
He went to the right person.
Yeah, he did.
All right. Well, there's also a big orange button on that technado.com page that says sponsored by IT Pro TV. Click on that, get a 30% off coupon code for the lifetime of your personal membership. You can also request a team trial and find out all the great features available to teams from IT Pro TV. All right. Fantastic. Well, as Don said earlier, this is the last of our live episodes, but we have recorded 2 new episodes that will go out these last couple weeks of December, which are going to be a lot of fun because we're looking back at our predictions from last year. We're playing some games. We're looking at our favorite articles, favorite guests. So it's definitely still timely stuff, just no news, basically.
It's
So-
the Chris Farley show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember the time?
Let's play the clip.
Yeah.
There it is. All right, but you'll have to wait till next week for that. So thank you so much to Jason Hicks for joining us from Coalfire earlier, and thank you guys for joining us as well. And we'll see you next week right here on Technado with Tom Pizzette.